Good afternoon, everyone. Looking forward to getting started today in regards to the topic of delegation. Really excited to share some information, especially things that have been popping up on the radar screen through some of the different leadership training and coaching work that I've been doing. So, hopefully, there's a few ideas in here that are going to be helpful to everyone, just as we get other folks kind of coming into the session this afternoon. Anyway, so yeah, most of you I know. As I was scanning the list, I think I have a whole bunch of folks on here that current clients, past clients, things like that. So thank you for making the time. And like I said, I appreciate that. For a few folks, if we haven't had an opportunity to meet. My name's Bob Peter. I am a leadership training guy. I really enjoy framing up and delivering leadership training. Do quite a bit of coaching work, especially small group coaching work that's facilitated as part of some of those different packages. Been in business about 27 years. Background came in HR and then into management training functions. Specifically for in the retail sector. So, at any rate, anything else you want to know about me, happy to share. But at this time, I do want to kind of get on topic, if you will. Just a little bit of housekeeping. I did send out a couple times the worksheets, pretty simple ones. But again, I want to keep this as simple as possible. I'm not overly complicated on approach. I think it's less important about kind of worrying about the complexity of tools and resources and models. The simpler it is, the better. So again, I did send some worksheets just because we will have time to spend a few minutes just penciling in at least one example to get you thinking a little bit about some of these different practices. And the biggest challenge always isn't necessarily kind of, hey, what's the tools and what's the resource and all those things. It's, are you choosing to do anything differently? All right. So my hope is at the end of the 45 minutes, everyone has an opportunity to really pick something that they can implement and that really helps or works with what you're already doing in the construct of the work and the place and who you're working with. The big thing with delegation, a lot of times, I asked that question about kind of what are some of the big challenges people face with delegation. The first one is time, which makes me kind of laugh because if we're good at delegation, we should pick up some time, right? So that's like kind of the dog chasing its tail type scenario. So hopefully we'll be able to address that one. And then secondly, some folks don't have people to delegate to. Okay, so if you're working on a team and maybe you just don't have any direct reports, you think, what's the point, right? But I've had a lot of folks, especially when I'm working with small groups, coaching and things of that nature, who actually have reached out, across different functional areas, working with colleagues, multiple project teams. And as long as the project managers or the folks that are in charge or supervising are kind of in agreement, that's an opportunity, right? To basically be able to leverage, if you will, those particular relationships. So just think about that. Again, if you happen to be a person that says, I don't have any direct reports, maybe you can kind of look around and see about maximizing the kind of the human resources around you, if you will, the people around you and their potential capabilities. And like I said, happy to bounce that around in a little bit more detail if that's one of the challenges that you face. All right. I appreciate people in the comments. Like I said, it looks like a few folks were having a little bit of choppiness. I'm not getting any reads on my side that's happening, but keep me posted. And it looks like it just wasn't everyone. It was just a few people. So again, any comments that you do have, I'll try to keep an eye on the comment box. We do have about 20 people on, so I would just ask that most people keep things muted if you can. And then, if there's questions or things that are specifically that you want to pop in, me, I'm all for that as well. And I will provide an opportunity for folks to ask some questions maybe towards the end of the session as we move through. Okay, so with that, I do want to get started. And so basically the essence of delegation, a couple things that we want to keep in mind is, why bother in regards to delegation, right? So I think what's really important as far as addressing this is, where do we start? And what I want to cover today is, one, how do we determine who we delegate to? And sometimes we don't think much about that, right? We just say, oh, we got to pass these things along. But the who is probably the most important thing that allows us to really do high quality delegation and get high quality results. What we delegate, again, it seems overwhelming, but hopefully we can put in place a couple ideas on simplifying that process. Delegation hows, again, you can look that up, but I'll give you the few steps to kind of keep in mind that align with some of this other information that's being presented. And then the importance of follow-up. I think, for me, I was always a person willing to delegate things or pass things along and have faith in people and all the rest of that stuff. But I wasn't always the best on the follow-up. And again, the follow-up is critical in regards to effective delegation. And then lastly, in the presentation, there's an AI prompt. But one of the things I will ask is if you stick around, I'm going to kick everybody out a delegation question coaching guide, if you will, and just coaching questions around all these different areas to explore and enhance the effectiveness of your delegation, whatever that might look like. And at the very end, there are a whole bunch of AI prompts that can help you kind of utilize chat or whatever your AI platform is to maybe get some additional information that can enhance your delegation practices as well. Okay, so we will send that out. Note taking, don't worry about it, screenshotting, all the rest of that stuff. I am recording this. I will also send the deck to everybody. Okay, so that will be in PDF format. But if it's something you want to use with your team, I see Steven on there from Geneseo. How you doing, Steven? If he wants to do something with his group and facilities down there, I'll send you the regular PowerPoint. Just message me and I'll make sure that happens for you. You can do whatever you want with it and put the content to work. Okay. All right. So this is what we're going to look at today. I'm going to work through the material fairly quickly, knowing you're going to get a copy of it. I want to spend a few minutes on having you just jot down some notes and actually do something with this stuff as we move through kind of this session. And then towards the end, like I said, I do just want you to stick around, and I just want to bounce a quick kind of thing that I'm working on going into Q1 with everybody towards the end of the session. All right. So that being said, just looking up here, sorry, trying to keep up with people coming in. Got a few more folks coming in. I'm not reading all this, and I'm going to apologize ahead because the slide decks do have a lot of information on them. But again, the point of that is, one, two things. I don't want to forget anything. And secondly, I think on webinars that are informational, it's good to know kind of, hey, I'm getting this information, but there might be something specific that jumps out to you. The biggest thing, especially in the work that I do, people say, why should I delegate? And my answer is, you will not get promoted if you don't. Right? So if Abby's so busy doing everything that Abby does all of the time, and she's interested in getting, promoted or move into a new position, or she wants to increase the scope and the influence of her current role, you can't do that if you're buried in your tactical task of whatever role that you're in. Okay, so one of the key things, and it kind of feeds into obviously the promotional readiness coaching I do. Absolutely critical, right? Nobody is going to get promoted if we're not working on that next level position. We can't possibly be working on those things if we're buried in the tactical components. Okay, so this is a really, really important kind of skill practice, if you will, in regards to just keeping your careers moving forward. And that's probably the number one reason. And obviously, there's a million reasons why to delegate. It's going to elevate your people. It's going to help workflows. It's going to create space to be more strategic and more creative, continuously improve things, improve performances and all those other things. But on a selfish note, we want to be able to kind of continue to kind of grow our careers and our scope, our compensation, and those types of things. All right. So where we start basically is here. Okay, so who do we delegate to? And I think this is sometimes, as I mentioned, something that gets overlooked fairly easily. We just start delegating. All right, so a couple of the handouts that I did pass along to you was one, the delegation matrix. Okay, and then secondly is the talent profile that actually mirrors the tools that I use in my promotional readiness coaching. Okay, so it mirrors some of those different areas and things that I do some gap analysis on and do some planning around and scheduling around with folks that are actually gearing for promotion and getting ready for that next level position. So what I'm going to invite you to do is this, in regards to the delegation matrix. Okay, the way it works is pretty simple. Is I'm just going to ask you if you do have a person or persons in mind that are on your team, right? So let me just kind of advance here for you. All you're doing is, who are they, right? So if I go down this list, and again, see Gina, hi Gina, basically in regards to the names of those people, or a person, but at least do a person, you're just simply scoring them on these three areas. Competence level, right? If they're a brand new employee, they may not have the same level of competence, as someone who's been around a while, okay? Confidence level. Sometimes people come in and they might have a little bit lower competence, right? Maybe a competence of 2 or 3, but they're super just confident, right? They try new things, they take risks, they're open to learning, they're excited about that stuff, so they could still have a confidence score of 4. And on the flip side, we could have people that are fairly tenured, but they don't really have any confidence to take on new tasks or try new things or those types of things. So this is kind of gives us a score in these areas. And then the third area is capacity. Okay, I think the number one mistake leaders make sometimes is they're worried about everybody being so busy. And what you'll find is that's true, but when we approach delegation with a little bit more being more deliberate, there are capacities for folks, right? Or as a leader, I need to create a little bit of space for people to be able to take on these tasks. I share this with a lot of folks that I work with, and you've probably heard me say it. When I used to do some conferences, I would ask people, percentage of people, or just raise your hand if the organization and your manager fully utilize your talents and abilities in the job that you're in. And only about 10% of people would raise their hand. That means 90% of people probably have a little bit more to offer. So it's totally okay to ask and have some discussions about it to get things rolling, okay? But that being said, in that capacity column, how would you score them? Okay, what capacity do they have to take on a little bit additional work, a little bit different work, capacity, again, that's kind of what we're gearing there. So who are the people? And again, what are their competence, confidence, and capacity? So at least complete that for a person. And again, if it's not a direct report, maybe it's somebody you work with on a project team. Maybe it's an opportunity you're thinking about in regards to leveraging. We have this group of people in the department, and sometimes we get an opportunity to assign tasks across different functional areas. That's totally okay too, but for the sake of argument, at least try to complete this activity for one person, okay? So I'll invite you to go ahead and do that and score them out if you haven't already. I've been talking long enough that everybody should probably be done with this particular activity, right? There you go. All right. So just try to get at least one person scored. If there's a couple people, it's a fairly quick activity, but it does get us thinking a little bit about these elements related to delegation. And again, if you are driving in a car, you don't have people traveling for the holidays. Happy holidays, everyone. Or access to the handouts. Just kind of think through this in your brain. That's obviously totally okay as well. All right. So the second thing would be talent profile. Now, I would encourage you to do this exercise. I don't care if you're delegating or not delegating, because we kind of need to know this information about the people that are reporting to us that we're responsible for developing and all those good things. But absolutely critical when we're considering who we're delegating to, we need to understand these things, okay? So again, for whatever employee, the employee's name goes in the middle there, and you would fill out a talent profile for each of your employees, okay? One of the pushbacks I get sometimes is, man, this takes a little bit of time. It does, but keeping in mind for, even the 30 minutes that it takes to get this information on each of your different people, let's say it took that long, chances are you're going to get that back, 3, 4, 5-fold on a weekly basis, right? If we can really do a better job of delegating and elevating the productivity of our folks as well as ourselves through this process. And we're going to look at tasks a little bit later, which becomes really important as well, okay? So name whoever that employee is that we're going to use as a working example right now. All right. So again, if I use Michelle, I think she's driving somewhere. But if Michelle was in there from RIT and she was in the middle, I would just say to myself, let's just brainstorm. And you could dig into the information, right, in HR files, or take a look at, whatever's in their employee development file or LMS, if you have an LMS system and you track some of this stuff on employees. But knowledge level, what is it, right? If we're talking about some of our engineering architect friends on the call today, again, what knowledge level of specific tactical, technical knowledge do they have? And that might be related to specific tools that we utilize. It may be related to certain project experiences, jobs experiences, and those types of things. That may also fall in the experience element. But this is basically, what do they know currently, right? So that's their job knowledge. Skill sets. What specific skills do they have? Again, that might be particular technical skills. It might be specific project management skills. Project management can be a skill or competency, obviously. So what maybe they have some skills in regards to AI, right? Maybe they have some drone piloting skills, right? Being utilized now in surveying and different things like that in different types of organizations. So what skills do they have, and how would you kind of label those things out? And that's going to be specific to positions. And if we don't know, we need to be asking our people that, right? Because maybe we really don't know. Hey, the last thing we took a look at was their resumes, and now let's do a skills inventory to make sure everything's being documented. All right. Experience is really, really important. So again, what job experience do they have? Let's be thorough on that. If it's working with community groups, or hey, I have to go to a town board meeting. Do they have that experience? Don't they have that experience? Okay, I want to inventory the experience related to the job. If it's doing student interviews, right? Some higher ed folks working with departments within that. What experience do they have in doing student interviews, or following up with families if there's a particular issue, right, related to our particular department? So these are experiential experience things. They have the knowledge, they have the skills, but are they actually using those, and what other levels of experience do they need in regards to their jobs or that they currently have? Attributes would be characteristics. People are super positive. They bring a positive attitude every day. They're optimistic. They look forward to doing different things. They're open to learning. This is where some of those key characteristics go in regards to specific attributes that may serve them well in those experience elements. Okay, as well as who gets. Remember, we're doing this to determine who am I delegating to, right? So what types of people and what types of characteristics am I looking for in folks that I would be more interested in passing along different tasks and different things that might be helpful for them from a developmental perspective, as well as for me to get off my plate. Okay, and then I mentioned down below, sorry, we have a double experience there, but the last experience on the bottom should actually be relationships, and I apologize for that. But relationships are really important. So if you think about relationships in the context of network, who do they know? What kind of contacts do they have? Are they parts of professional associations, right? What are their contact base on, let's say, one of our campuses? What level of contacts do they normally interact with? Cross-departmental, okay? Are they interacting with cabinet members? Are they interacting with VPs, director level folks? Are they interacting with kind of peers across different functioning departments? So we want to just get a snapshot and notes on basically the relationships and the networks that they currently have, okay? That's going to be important as well, because as you go to delegate tasks, that's going to either create, make it easy, right? It's pretty easy because I already have these relationships, or there's going to be barriers because they can't really get this work done without folks helping them, right? Downstream, upstream, whatever it is. So if they don't have those relationships, something to keep in mind. Doesn't mean that we don't delegate it. We just need to build that into the delegation plan so that we're creating these relationships for them and helping facilitate that, okay? So the talent profile, like I said, I was talking through the elements: knowledge, skills, attributes, experience, and relationships network. Okay, we just want to jot down a few notes related to that person, whoever that is, for the purpose of this activity. Think about them, and you want to be thinking about kind of the information related to that person in each of these areas. I would suggest brainstorming it first from your current perspective and what you know, and then obviously sitting with the employee and filling in the blanks. That can be really, really helpful. As we do the work with who we delegate to, I might have 5, 6, 7 direct reports, and after I complete that previous document, right? So after I go ahead and do the delegation matrix, I may only have 2 or 3 that I feel have the competence, confidence, and capacity scores that's where I'm starting, and that's totally okay. Maybe it's just one person, okay? So obviously we won't have to complete a talent profile right away for everyone, but just to get us started with some of this work, pick a person, key in on it, run through this activity with that person. You can duplicate that activity, obviously, with other folks on your team, okay? All right, talent profile. So again, if you want to just take a minute, if you haven't already done it, person's name, knowledge, skills, attributes, experience, all right? And relationship network, okay, at the bottom there. So anything that just comes to mind about this person that you can fill in some of these blanks right away, jot them down just to go through the process and get some initial information down in regards to keys to determining who we delegate to, okay? So we have the delegation matrix complete. Whoop. This will give us a snapshot of who's in the best position maybe for some initial delegation. It might confirm who we already are delegating to. It might identify a blind spot if somebody's on here and we're like, oh, didn't think of that, but now I am. Okay. And then go ahead and complete the talent profile for that particular person. All right. Then we get into, this work, right? What are some potential barriers we want to be aware of as we're working on delegation? Okay. It's tough if we always we have a go-to person. Okay. And usually this is a really high performer, they're very, self-directed, action-oriented, they get it done, and, they have some experience, right? They're willing to learn. We could go down the list, okay? But what happens is if we only key in on that one person, other folks aren't getting the same opportunities from our delegation. We're also not building any bench strength, and chances are that person's going to be in danger of some burnout, right? All that stuff makes sense. So just things we want to kind of keep in mind, all right? That's why it's important, like I said, to kind of complete the pre-work that we just mentioned and work on some rotational development, all right? Delegating to people who aren't ready. So again, one of the things people use is a 70-30 rule. They should be 70% familiar with what's going on, and then we can fill in the blanks on 30%, and that's kind of the learning component. This really depends on the complexity of task, okay, and the development of the task. Some tasks are going to be developmental. I always use the term, some tasks are going to be bringing that person up to expertise level, right? They use the phrase in sports, you don't practice to get it right, right? That's fine. Okay, so yeah, this person can, proof drawings, and they're normally catch everything, right? So that's getting it right. What we want to do is we want people to do different tasks till they can't get it wrong. It's almost automatic, right? So think about delegation in those terms. It doesn't always have to be strictly developmental. It can be that we're just building expertise, right? And that's totally okay. And that comes from routine. That comes from repetitive work. And then lastly would be, it just needs to get done and I don't need to do it. And that's okay too, right? That's the element of elevating your role and your capacity. You're going to be pulling people along, but there's still work that just has to get done. Okay, so, and that's totally all right. We shouldn't be feeling bad about that as well. All right. Last one for most bosses, especially if you're in positions like engineers and architects, you're in control of your stuff, right? Now all of a sudden you're giving that control away a little bit. That can be a little scary. But again, that's a lot of dealing with kind of that self-awareness component of emotional intelligence and things. And if you use a structured process like this, you should be selecting the right people, you should be selecting the right tasks, and that process should lend itself to you feeling a little bit better, right, about kind of working down this path. And delegation has a way of kind of snowballing, right? Once you get that rolling, people start stepping it up. People start executing. The process works, and that's going to help elevate, obviously, the people around you and your ability to elevate yourself, okay? So just some different things, and this is kind of how I broke it out in regards to just be aware of some barriers related to potential delegation. All right. That's the who's, okay? So now we get into the what's, and before we can jump to what we delegate, we really need to take a hard look at, what do we even do? When I do productivity, workflow, or workload management, that kind of, either training or we integrate into some of the coaching work that we do, I think one of the most important things is, not everybody has a picture of what they actually complete. And one of the most powerful exercises you can do is a time analysis study, but it's painful, right? It's like going to the gym and doing burpees, for 5 minutes. It's death. I get that. But there is no better way of doing those things, right? And at the end of the day, if you did, 50 burpees a day for 30 days, you probably wouldn't have to do much else, and it's going to move your bar in regards to your physical fitness, right? So I'm going to say it's painful, but if you're willing to do it, you don't even have to do a complete time analysis, which is stopping every 15 minutes, jotting down what you're working on, what you're doing, how long it takes, but at least do a brainstorm on a task analysis, okay? So one of the documents that I did pass out to everyone was a task analysis, just a blank sheet with some columns, but the idea here is take 1 minute and brainstorm tasks. The challenge is always details in the tasks, okay? So again, if I'm picking on Abby, her name just happens to be there. Amy's there too. But basically, if Amy just thinks to herself, I'm on the phone a lot. All right, so I take phone calls. Well, what phone calls? Because if you just put phone calls there, it doesn't really tell us anything about whether that's something delegatable or not. There's just not enough detail, okay? If I take client calls, and then maybe even client calls related to these 3 to 4 different category areas, that's really helpful and much more specific, okay? So be as specific as you can. So something like calls, break those down a little bit. You don't have to do it today, but you'll want to do that eventually. Same thing with, filing, what kind of filing for what kind of projects. If it's going to be, project management, you got to break that down. What projects am I involved with? What are the different tasks involved in the projects? What types of things am I doing related to the projects right now? Because I have to know and be clear on those before I can determine whether it's something that I can do what? Delegate to someone else, okay? Or even prepare other people so that I can delegate to them in the future, all right? So a task analysis is really important. So I would ask you to complete this, and there's a couple more steps. So as you're doing it, instead of me coming back and have you go back to your list, I'm just going to provide those directions right now, and then I'm going to give you literally 2 minutes to kind of brainstorm. Even if it's 5 or 6 different tasks, that's fine. But complete the list, and then I want you to label it utilizing the Eisenhower matrix. Okay, so if you're familiar with the matrix, that's awesome. But basically, tasks fall into one of these quadrants. All right, they're either going to be important and urgent tasks, things that have to be done. They have deadlines and consequences if they don't get done. Delegation quadrants, maybe not as important, but still something that has to be done, and there might be some urgency around. Okay, then we look over to the other quadrants, which are important, not urgent. These are things that never get done. They get procrastinated, but they create barriers and blockages for our own development as well as others. Okay, so things in here are like personal development, right? Things in here like coaching my employees when they're doing good stuff, right? I'm going to have to deal with the bad stuff, but I put off the other things, right, for whatever reason. So not urgent, but still super important. Strategy stuff, right? Creativity things sometimes end up falling in this quadrant where we just keep shoving those things off because we're buried in the tactical work, all right? And then lastly, this is really important to do as an individual, but also with your team, and why this task analysis is so important is there's things you're doing right now that are complete distractions from what your priorities are. Complete distractions, all right? So identifying the distractions and eliminating those, super important. We have to identify tasks that we are either unnecessary or we should not be doing any longer because we're doing other tasks, right? And maybe they're just been done and nobody's questioning at all. Do we still need this report? Do we still got to generate it? Nobody's asked those questions along the way. So I always encourage the leaders I work with, you should always be asking people, what are we doing we shouldn't be doing? Right? What types of stuff should go away? Who's not using the stuff that we're generating from our department, right? What types of forms are we still using that are outdated, right? Or it's antiquated, right? Those types of things. That's quadrant 4 stuff, okay? So again, this is kind of the Eisenhower matrix if you're not familiar. And the process is do your task analysis, even if it's only 6 or 7 tasks. What quadrant do those tasks fall in, and then what's the priority? Maybe 1 star for somewhat priority, 3 stars if it's a high priority item. And then lastly, am I the only person that can do this? Am I the only one? The only one that can do it, okay? It's either yes or no. So see how many tasks you can list out, label them quadrant, priority, and yes or no if you're the only person that can do that task, all right? And see how many you can get here in the next 60 seconds or so. Ready, set, go. So one of the fun things about task analysis, I think I've had both conversations, is people going, "Holy cow! No wonder I feel like I live in chaos." Right? If I do a full list here and it's just tons of things that are on it. The second thing would be is I list 5 or 6 things. I'm like, I'm busier than that. What's going on? Which means we obviously have to break those 5 or 6 things down a little bit. But no right or wrong. Again, this is just an idea of getting clear. I did mention a time analysis study, so I'm not going to say you have to do every 15 minutes. But the good thing to do is take your task analysis list, just set it on your desk. Keep it with you in your binder, and for a week, once in a while, look at that sucker. You know what I mean? So if it's once, maybe mid morning and in the afternoon, see if there's anything that you've been working on and doing that didn't make your list that you need to add to that. And if you do that for a week, it's going to be a pretty solid list. When I do this in training, I really encourage people to share their lists with each other, especially if they're colleagues and coworkers. And colleagues and coworkers can point out any particular gaps or holes. Okay, so more than welcome to do that as well. But the more thorough your task list for a personal productivity perspective as well as delegation, the better. Okay, so getting that list done is really, really important. So when we think a little bit about, what do I delegate? All right. Basically, a couple quick strategies here. One, delegate the do's and the delegates, right? So from those particular quadrants, right, when we're looking at quadrant number 1 and quadrant number 2, there's a lot of stuff in there that should be stuff that we can delegate. We can also delegate the work related to elimination or the, research in regards to unnecessary tasks, the elimination of distractions, that kind of stuff, to get rid of stuff in 4. That could be actually something that we give to somebody to do as well, okay? And some things in 3, but I would say the 80-20 rules, 80% of stuff that falls in 1 and 2 are things that could be potentially delegatable, okay? So that's what we're looking for. Anything that you coded 1, you coded 2, for sure consider in regards to delegation, depending on obviously my team and my team members, okay? And then the second thing would be ask these questions. Can this be done without my authority? We already asked the question of, do I actually have to do it? My theme on delegation, if it's anything that can be done by anybody else, I need to try to be working on getting rid of that, okay? But 3 questions. Can this be done without my authority? Yes or no. If it's a yes, then we could potentially delegate it. Does this align with someone else's development goals? Should be delegated. Would delegating this increase our team's capacity, my capacity as a leader? If yes, that's good, right? So 2 out of 3 of these, then for sure that task needs to be delegated away. And it's a starting place in regards to kind of how you approach what you're delegating, all right? Now, barriers. Leaders, things that we want to keep in mind. We don't want to just give away all the stuff that's just repetitive stuff, right? We also want to blend that in with developmental opportunities for folks as well, or there will be that feeling of dumping grounds. That feeling exists too if, as a leader, I don't do any of that stuff ever, right? So if you're a person that rolls up your sleeves, in my experience with most of the people I work with, you're roll up the sleeves people. You're as willing to jump into, the fire and put it out as anybody else. So really that first one doesn't even exist probably for most of you, okay? Delegating tasks without delegating authority, be aware. And I think this is a great fix. You can decide X and Y. Check with me on this. If you have the experience related to the task, you should be able to provide that perspective to someone and save that person worrying about it or stressing out all over it, okay? And then lastly, leaders don't know what to get rid of, and we talked a little bit about that, right? So we talked a little bit about 70-30 rule on delegation, who we're delegating to, and identifying those tasks, quadrant 1 and 2 for barrier number 3, all right? When we get into how do I delegate, right? So this is kind of, I identified my people that are going to be potential folks that I could delegate to. I'm taking a hard look at tasks and things that responsibilities that I'm doing and what types of things might align with folks, and going through a little bit of an analysis on that. Then it comes down to the process, and we covered some of these things. But what's really important is define the outcome. What's the ideal outcome of what you're looking for, right? If it's something that we've already done or something that's similar to what we've done, we have to explain the why. Super, super important. That makes people better understand kind of why they're doing what they're doing and why that's valuable. We also want to discuss how they feel about it. This gets skipped sometimes. And, again, if there's natural reservations, if they haven't done something before, just talking about it for a couple minutes and understanding how you can support that will really help eliminate any potential friction in that process. Okay. Then we look at describing the success criteria, and again, that's looking at kind of the X, and you do X and Y, and come to me with Z. This is how we know those are the boundaries, and then how do we describe what this whole process looks like from a success perspective. This is what we're shooting for, okay? Agree on the milestones, and what's really important is the check-ins. Don't leave it to chance. Just establish a check-in schedule for whatever that task is. That's going to vary depending on the complexity of the task, obviously. The scope of task, meaning time. If it's a longer term task, obviously more check-ins. If it's complex, more check-ins more frequently. Okay. If it's not, establishing some kind of check-in schedule that's not overwhelming for you, not overwhelming for your delegate person, but something that's going to work for both of you. All right. Written summaries are critical. And again, this literally is about a minute or two worth of typing that could save hours worth of pain. Okay, so make sure that you're just summarizing what you've talked about with the person, the delegated task, and the information. Send that over, and then don't wait for something or a question to come up. Again, through check-ins, and then coach during the work, not after, right? So if there's things that we need to tweak or support someone on or make some adjustments, we should be doing that in process during those check-ins, or in between the check-ins even, as we're interacting with these folks that are taking on these new tasks and responsibilities. All right, so again, all of this coming your way, but I don't think there's anything in here that you're not aware of, but just maybe things that we're not spending enough time on, and we could just fine-tune it a little bit and make sure that practice is in place, okay? All right, so take a look at the barriers here. Under communicating expectations, problem. All right, so if there's unclear expectations, if you're like me, you over assume that your explanations are clear. Super important to put checks on that. Okay, so again, depending on your communication style and what your tendencies are, just be aware. Micromanaging due to your own anxiety, not the employees, right? So just because you feel like you've given something away and you're not sure about it, doesn't mean that the employee is not doing a good job with it and things. That's the importance of this process and agreed check-in things. Please don't jump in over those. Hey, we got all these checkpoints identified, and I said we were going to talk on Fridays, and now you're popping into my office on Wednesday, right? Because you're worried. You know what I mean? So if there's grounds, it's one thing, but if there's not, be aware of that. And again, high levels of self-awareness from your perspective on the delegation side. And then no after action reviews. So again, this really limits growth. It repeats, again, mistakes from being repeated. So we have to do these quick after action reviews. How did the task go? Nice job on it. What went well? What didn't? And that's going to help you as a leader when we delegate that task again, either to the same person or somebody else. We can take that into consideration in regards to making sure that's more effective. Okay. Couple quick tips in delegation. Delegate outcomes, that empowers people, all right? So you can say, here's a spreadsheet I set up, fill it in. Well, that's great, that's fun. Or you can say, hey, I need a report hitting on these elements. See what that person comes up with. And how they do it's not going to be as important as long as the work gets done, right? And they're going to own that and feel empowered, which is good. Okay, match tasks to skills. We talked about this 30-70, but again, considering the complexity of the task, that doesn't necessarily always have to be true with more simple tasks, short-term tasks. Choose people who would grow and or knew or mastered the task, and we talked a little bit about that. All right. Lastly, follow-up. Again, the power of delegation, follow-up is probably the key. Even if you do all these other things, no follow-up, delegation may fall off the tracks, all right? And we want to keep it on the rails. So again, setting clear check-in points up front, we talked about that. All right, strategy 2, use a simple framework to guide the check-ins. Don't overcomplicate discussions, just hit on these few bullets and move on. Doesn't have to be a long meeting, could be 2 minutes, or it might be 15 if there's some of these things we have to discuss in a little bit more detail. Okay. Strategy 3, close the loop with written communication. That's really, really important as well. So summarize your check-in meetings, make sure you get those in writing. That's going to be helpful to you and the other person, especially if there's differences in communication styles and expectations around how that person is absorbing the information. Some people verbal, it's great to have a written reinforcer. Okay. Things we want to be aware of, you assume your employee or the person you're delegating to us for help. Doesn't happen, right? People don't ask for help because it makes them feel weak. Okay, so let's just go with that. So building in the checkpoints is important. Overchecking, micromanaging, we talked about, and then the importance of those follow-ups. Okay, so just be aware of the risks and these fixes that we're talking about. They're not huge, but they make a big difference in regards to the overall process as far as effective delegation is concerned. Okay, and again, you'll be getting the information. You can take a little bit harder look. All right, so couple thoughts here. As I mentioned, coaching question guides, so they're set up. So who do I delegate to? You can talk with folks and get information from them that fills in the blanks, and probably some of those KSA experience, relationship, network blanks. That's going to be really, really important. There's going to be some AI prompts in there in regards to leveraging and becoming a more effective delegator, right? So this was just an example of one in regards to kind of an all-in prompt. Right, so if I'm just kind of considering typing this sucker in, it's going to say, hey, help me create a complete delegation plan for this particular task. The more detail you describe the task, the more information you're going to get back, and then you can massage that up. But it should create a pretty cool checklist and information criteria that you can build off and save a tremendous amount of time. Okay, so that's the idea. We want to leverage AI to kind of save us some time in the long run. All right, so those are the key components. As I mentioned, you'll get the coaching guide as kind of follow up to today's session. One thing I will mention is going into the first quarter, if there's anybody out there, you are interested in making sure, hey, I want to land a promotion by the end of the year, you want to jumpstart that, let me know. Okay, I'm taking on about 5 folks in Q1 to work with one-on-one. I think, again, unless you're really close and you're already doing that job at 75%, it requires more than 3 months, legit 6 to 12 probably, to allow yourself time to get the experiences and things. But I will guarantee we'll create a readiness advancement plan that includes all of those elements, making sure that those things are on your schedule for the next 6 to 12 months if that's what you need. Okay, coming out of that 3-month engagement, and we'll connect on a weekly basis. The average promotions 10 to 20% usually in salary from a salary perspective. Lots of organizations, if you're in leadership training programs, this is kind of a next level preparation. They may even entertain kind of that as your next level development if they do some coaching work in your organizations. So if you are interested, you can message me here. Most of you have my email. Drop me an email and we can get you started. And like I said, if you do have a little bit of a quieter week coming through the holidays here, it's not a bad time for an initial discussion and to get the ball rolling on that. So give me a heads up and let me know. All right. So that's what I have in regards to delegation. 5 components, lots of information there. Those 3 basic documents, give it a run. Fill it out on at least one person that's going to be a person that you want to delegate to. Complete the task analysis. Do some work in regards to how you're prioritizing your tasks, which tasks fall into what quadrant, which ones are going to be most delegatable, and be able to kind of start somewhere. But then just make that commitment, right? Because you start with 1 person, then 2 people, and then 3 people. You're already delegating right now. Maybe this lends a little bit more structure to that process and effectiveness. It's going to snowball for you, and that's really going to open up your ability to kind of expand and grow in your current role as well as prepare for the next one. All right. I will stay on for a couple minutes if anybody has any specific questions. If not, like I said, I'll kick all the information to you following the session today. So just look for an email from me, and it will have the slide deck PDF format. If you want the request in regards to regular PowerPoint, just respond back to me, and I'll send that over to you, as well as the coaching guides. All right. If there's nothing else, I'm just going to say happy holidays to everyone who's online. Thanks for making the time. And like I said, feel free to jump off. If there's anybody that wants to stay on and ask any specific questions and chat a little bit, happy to do that as well. So at this time, feel free to unmute, and I'll be happy to entertain any questions or thoughts. If not, have an awesome Merry Christmas, good holidays, New Year, all those good things.
Thanks, Bob. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Chris, you on there? Chris K, you still on?